President-elect Donald Trump, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Late as hell. So I had posted a video complaining about this video, about David Pac-Man's video, where he just goes on and on about how all the things in the world are all the reasons why he's successful except himself. Everything is the reason but himself. He really does say that. Like, I'm not exaggerating here. He goes on and on about the perfect timing of things being in such a way that it just made him successful. And if he was not born in the specific time period that he was born in, all this hoop going through, all this hoopla to somehow prove that the self-made person does not exist. Well, let's be real here. He's bugging.
Entrepreneurs and self-made business people in general, this is one of the most pathetic and nakedly bogus tropes of the American right wing. They love applying it to Trump. They love applying it to Elon Musk. So I want to break it down and have a conversation about it. Now, you hear it about the big time entrepreneurs when it comes to the businesses that they created, but it often goes even further than that and sort of overlaps into stories of alpha men and self-sufficiency and personal responsibility. And the reason that we care about this is that the trope is often used to justify no taxes, other wacky policies as well when it comes to cutting social safety nets. It's just like...
Not that wacky, by the way. Not that wacky. And I don't think people are... well, some people are suggesting that you would essentially have a non-government, no government, but that's not what the right wing is suggesting, and that's not what a lot of people are suggesting. However, just because things are, we'll get to it.
If you want to just do it yourself, you're going to do it and you're going to be successful. But the reality that a lot of these MAGA people need to be confronted with is that no one is really self-made. And I don't just mean that two people had to come together so an egg and a sperm made you. Like, I'm not talking about that.
He basically is. Just wait. He is literally talking about that.
You weren't really self-made. And I thought about this.
He's saying that everyone's to blame but yourself.
Because over the holiday, I ran into someone from my hometown who said, wow, David, your podcast, the show, you really did it yourself. You just built it. Now, to be clear, I think it's important that we don't diminish ingenuity, creativity, hard work over sustained periods of time to build things. But as I think about myself, right, I didn't invent podcasting and online video.
What does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with anything at all? He invented his podcast, his videos. He may have used tools that already existed, but he still did his thing. And that's the most significant part. That's the key to anyone's success, what they did for themselves. It is the primary factor.
Create the platforms that I use to broadcast: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, all of these things. These exist because of the tech ecosystem that's been shaped by public research, government investment, global infrastructure, mostly people who went to public school,
Are you allowed to do that on YouTube?
Paid for by tax dollars, making all of this stuff. Even the equipment I use, the microphone, the camera, the computers, it's affordable thanks to trade agreements and global.
This psycho is attributing a whole bunch of non-things, non-essentials, to his own success. It's wild. They're non-essential. They're not the reason why necessarily he's successful. Those things can exist and people will do nothing with them, which is always the case. From the mic was created because of previous inventions, and those previous inventions were created because of previous inventions, and each layer is added to by, usually, believe it or not, a single individual. It may have been, other people may have contributed, but the idea is held, the concepts are held by individual people. So it's irrelevant. Because, as many objectivists like to say, there's no collective consciousness. There's no collective thoughts.
Globalization and subsidized research. Decades of policy decisions made it possible for me to buy this equipment without breaking the bank. I had nothing to do with that. I just benefited from it. Let's not forget the public research institutions that laid the groundwork for the connectivity technology that we rely on. The internet born out of DARPA, a US government agency, taxpayer funded. GPS I use to get to, my book events, developed with taxpayer money. The chips in the computer benefited from government funded research into semiconductors. And the other thing that I think is interesting to consider is that the show didn't start with $1 million marketing budget. It grew on social media, platforms subsidized by public infrastructure like broadband internet, satellites, fiber optic networks, which exist thanks to public investment. The fact that I do this show in English is a huge part of its success. If I had stayed in Argentina, where I was born, speaking Spanish, I wouldn't have a show like this. I might have a show, but it wouldn't be
So, which is the primary? That there are other English speakers, and so they're the cause of his success? Or the fact that he learned English and then chose to do the show? What's the primary here?
a show like this. And I'm here thanks to the green card lottery that my family got in 1989, a program funded through American tax dollars. And there's even more. I work in a country with stable economic and legal systems. I don't have to worry about currency collapse or civil war, usually anyway. That's the...
But why, though? Why don't you have to worry about it? All those things that he just described were only possible because select people put in the work to make that possible. To be clear, it wasn't everybody, and it could not have been everybody. So if it isn't obvious, the primary thing here is the individual contribution. You know what I mean?
These are not David Pac-Man achievements. These are the products of living in a society where institutions, even though they are flawed, still function. My audience finds me because they have leisure time or enough leisure time to watch videos and listen to podcasts. That exists because of labor laws.
That's not why. Oh my God.
Weekends, societal advancements, and without those, I have no show because no one has energy or time to consume content. Electricity, we take it completely for granted. The studio doesn't run on magic. It doesn't run on ivermectin, right? It's powered by a publicly regulated grid. Lights, cameras, computers. Without that, without those public utilities, I have nothing.
And you know something else? It's public right now, but it doesn't have to be. He would like his audience to believe that everything has to do with the environment. Everything has to do with everybody else, not yourself. At all. Nothing. Zilch. Nada. I know at the beginning he made this whole disclaimer and everything, but he doesn't actually believe that. He just made a disclaimer because people would trip. As much as I would love to talk shit more about David Pac-Man, we're going to move on.
You are the first president since Grover Cleveland to win non-consecutive terms. Republicans now have control of the House and the Senate.
Right.
What do you plan to accomplish in your first 100 days in office?
Well, we're going to do something with the border, and very strong, very powerful. That'll be our first signal, and the first signal to America that we're not playing games. We have people coming in by the millions, as you know, and a lot of people shouldn't be here. Most of them shouldn't be here, but we have jails being emptied into our country. We have mental institutions from all over the world being emptied into our country. So we'll be doing that. We're going to be extending within that period, or as soon as we can, the Trump tax cuts, because, you know, they're coming due and they're very substantial for people. And it would be very, I think it will anger a lot of people, frankly, if we don't get an extension of that. That's what led us to one of the greatest economies ever. And those two things are going to be very vital, very important. We're going to be focusing on crime in the cities, and we'll work with Democrat governors. Most of them are, as you know, if you look at the 25 worst places, they're just about all Democrat-controlled cities and states. And we're going to be working with Democrat governors and Democrat mayors, and I look forward to doing it. But we have to do something about crime, and mostly in our cities. And we're going to have a lot of other things. We'll be...
That right there is a bit of a misnomer. You know when you learn a new word and you just keep using it over and over and over again? Not that I didn't know the word. I did, but I never remembered to use it. So I've recently been using the word misnomer over and over and over again. But I find it hard to believe. Maybe I'm bugging. But I find it hard to believe that it's as clear cut as he just described. You know? That, he just said some of the worst cities Democrat controlled. We would have to go into what we're defining as worse, like by what standard, in order to really discover what cities are doing the worst. Because in all the places that you can think of that are so shitty, according to these types of people, there's a lot going on in those places. And you know something else? I think if it was that shitty, I think people would just dip. If it was that bad, wouldn't they just dip? But people crowd these places. They love it there. You know, New York City, man, they fucking love it, bro.
Working on nominations. We're going to still be working on some nominations. I think they're going very well. We have, for the most part, I think they're going extremely well. It looks like Peter's doing well now. I mean, people were a little bit concerned. He's a young guy with a tremendous track record, actually. Went to Princeton and went to Harvard. He was a good student at both, but he loves the military, and I think people are starting to see it. So we'll be working on his nomination along with a lot of others.
We are going to delve into your nominations, but since you bring him up, do you still have confidence in Pete Hegseth?
Yes, I do. I really do. He's a very smart guy. I've known him through Fox, but I've known him for a long time. And he's basically a military guy. I mean, every time I talk to him, all he wants to talk about is the military. He's a military guy. I used to kid him about it. I didn't think would be in this position where he may be, hopefully will be Secretary of Defense. But every time I was with him, he was fighting for soldiers, where he said some soldier was unjustly put in prison because they were really doing what they were taught to do, in some cases. So, yeah, I think he's going to.
Are you struggling in calculus?
Oh my God.
Having a hard time understanding your instructor? Do you wish there was a better way?
That's...
I get it. Feeling lost.
Do fine.
The fact that there are these allegations against him, misconduct, sexual misconduct, heavy drinking, the fact that he said to some senators reportedly he'll stop drinking if he gets this job, does that worry you?
No, I think that everybody has something that they can stop. Some people can stop eating. I'm lucky I'm not a drinker, but I could stop eating. And we all want to stop doing something. And if he said that, I mean, it's a nice thing to say. That's a good thing to say. But he's very respected. I can tell you, I know a lot of the people at Fox, they think he's fantastic. And the people that work with him, really, they love him. So I think you're going to have somebody that's really terrific. And again, all he talked about with me, I said, you know, you're not really a television guy, even though he did very well, as you know. You're really a military guy. He said, I'm all about the military. And I told him, so he's making a lot of money at Fox. They're doing very well. And I said, you know, if for some reason you don't get this thing, you're not going to be able to go back. And all that money you're making, you can kiss it goodbye. He said, this is all about America. You know, he didn't say, well, let me think about it, let me discuss it. That's a very big, risky thing he's doing. When he goes and he says, I'm going to give up, you know, millions of dollars in order to possibly become the Secretary of Defense. A lot of people would say it's a great position. It's probably almost no greater position, but a lot of people would say, I have to think about it. He said, I don't have to think about it.
All right, we're going to delve into your cabinet picks a little bit later, but I want to delve into one of your signature promises on the campaign trail, which was to end inflation, to lower prices. You are now proposing tariffs against the United States' three biggest trading partners. Economists of all stripes say that ultimately consumers pay the price of tariffs.
I don't believe
Can
it.
you guarantee American families won't pay more?
I can't guarantee anything. I can't guarantee tomorrow. But I can say that if you look at just pre-COVID, we had the greatest economy in the history of our country. And I had a lot of tariffs on a lot of different countries, but in particular China. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars, and we had no inflation. In fact, when I handed it over, they didn't have inflation for a year and a half. They went almost 2 years just based on what I had created. And then they created inflation with energy and with spending too much. So I think I'm a big believer in tariffs. I think tariffs are the most beautiful word. I think they're beautiful. It's going to make us rich. We're subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. We're subsidizing Mexico for almost $300 billion. We shouldn't be subsidizing. Why are we subsidizing these countries? If we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state. We're subsidizing Mexico, and we're subsidizing Canada, and we're subsidizing many countries all over the world. And all I want to do is I want to have a level, fast, but fair playing field.
Sir, your previous tariffs during your first administration cost America.
So, we can go on and on about how the tariff thing is not going to work. But let's instead speak about the sentiment. You know, it's true. We are subsidizing the world. That is true. Now, I don't believe for a second that a tariff is going to save the day, if you will. But, because we could just, stop subsidizing the world in all the different ways we do it. But he's bringing up a real issue. This is a real thing.
Americans some $80 billion, and now you have major companies from Walmart, Black & Decker, AutoZone saying that any tariffs are going to force them to drive up prices for their consumers. How do you make sure that these CEOs, that these companies don't, in fact, pass on the cost of tariffs to their consumers?
They cost Americans nothing. They made a great economy for us. They also solve another problem. If we were going to have problems having to do with wars and having to do with other things, tariffs, I have stopped wars with tariffs by saying, you guys want to fight, it's great, but both of you are going to pay tariffs to the United States at 100%. And they have many purposes, tariffs, if properly used. I don't say you use them like a madman. I say properly used. But it didn't cost this country anything. It made this country money. And we never really got the chance to go all out because we had to fight COVID in the last part. And we did it very successfully. And when I handed it over to Biden, the stock market was higher than what it was just previous to COVID coming in. It was actually higher. Tariffs are properly used, are a very powerful tool, not only economically, but also for getting other things outside of economics.
Well, again, prices did go up on some goods in your first administration, washing machines, tires. Will you punish CEOs?
Let me just explain to you. No. You mentioned washing machines. So you look at Whirlpool in Ohio. I got a call from Jim Jordan, one of the greats, congressman from Ohio. And he said, they're going out of business because South Korea and China are dumping washing machines into our country. And I put a 50% tariff on the washing machines coming in from China and South Korea. And Whirlpool and the companies that made washing machines, which are based in Ohio, largely based in Ohio, went through the roof. We saved thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of jobs. They were all going out of business because they were dumping washing machines. And when I put the tariffs on, they became successful businesses. No, it didn't. Not only didn't it cost people, it made our country stronger and more powerful, and it kept jobs.
But how do you make sure that consumers don't wind up paying more? Will you punish CEOs who try to pass the cost of tariffs on to their customers?
Well, the market's going to take care of it. I mean, actually, the market takes care of it. And if it doesn't, we adjust it somewhat. But in the case of Whirlpool, or let's say companies that made washing machines, they were all being put out of business by the dumping from, in particular, South Korea and China. And when I put the tariffs on, very substantial tariffs, although peanuts compared to what people do to us, what countries do to us, it became a very, very powerful, successful company. Now, let's say I didn't do the tariffs. It would have gone out of business. You would have lost tens of thousands of jobs, and you don't include that in your equation. No, they make a lot of money. I'll go a step further. Tariffs are going to make our country rich. Tariffs are going to help us pay off $35 trillion in debt. Tariffs are going to make our country safe because China, as an example, doesn't want to play games with us if we're going to do tariffs on them. They don't want to play games. And we have a lot of games being played on us right now.
Well, I think, and that takes me to my next question. Yeah. Are you actually going to impose these tariffs, or are they a negotiating tactic?
Well, I'll give you an example.
What the fuck was that, Vinner? What kind of question is that?
With Canada, and in particular Mexico.
Kind of said
we have millions of
it
people
was.
pouring into our country. You agree with that? I spoke with both. I spoke
think it's
with
gonna
Justin
work, though.
Trudeau. In fact, he flew to Mar-a-Lago
be the-
within about 15 seconds after the call. And he was
Any kind
at
of
Mar-a-Lago.
primary
We were having dinner talking about it.
Cure of anything.
I said, you have to close
It
up your
won't be.
borders because they're coming in the northern border too a lot. Not like the southern border, but they're coming in the Canadian border a lot. And drugs are pouring in. Almost as importantly, drugs are pouring in, maybe more importantly, drugs are pouring in at levels never seen before, 10 times what we had. They're just pouring in. We can't have open borders. And I said to the president of Mexico and to Justin Trudeau, if it doesn't stop, I'm going to put tariffs on your country at about 25%. That's a very substantial tariff. And in both cases, but in the case where it was really visible, within 10 minutes after that phone call, we noticed that the people coming across the border, the southern border, having to do with Mexico, they were at a trickle, just a trickle. It was, in fact, I call the border. See, unlike my opponent, I do call the border a lot. And I said, how's the border looking today? They said, there's nobody here. They couldn't believe it. The military stopped these vast groups of people. You know, we call them caravans, but they had caravans of people, and they largely stopped them. Now, they're going to have to continue that, but if they don't continue, and the other thing I told them is no more drugs, and I told that to China, too. I had to deal with President Xi. Had the election been different, I'm going to be very nice because we don't have to get into an argument over 2020, but had the election been different, the result been different, we would have had China giving the maximum penalty, which is the penalty of death, to people that sent fentanyl into this country. But Biden didn't, unfortunately, finish that discussion up. I had an agreement with President Xi, who I got along with very well. We've had communication as recently as this week. And I had communication with him where they were going to give the death penalty to anybody sending drugs into the United States.
This week you had that conversation.
Not that conversation, but I had other conversations. Okay. But in the past, I've had that conversation.
Let me ask you about another aspect of the economy, sir, the minimum wage. The federal minimum wage has been $7.25 since 2009. There are 20 states that still have the federal minimum wage at $7.25, and I actually have a map. 19 of these states actually voted for you, sir. Mm-hmm. And you can see it right here. I don't know if you remember this, but during the debate in 2020, I asked you if you would raise the minimum wage. You said you would consider it. And so my question for you is, now that you are going back to the White House, for these 19 states that voted for you, are you going to raise the federal minimum wage?
It's a very low number. I will agree. It's a very low number. Let me give you the downside, though. Yeah. In California, they raised it up to a very high number. And your restaurants are going out of business all over the place. The population is shrinking. It's had a very negative impact. But there is a level at which you could do it, absolutely. Yeah.
What is that level, do you
think? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I can say this. You have a lot of businesses that are open and thriving because of the lower minimum wage. If you raise it too much, and you understand this, if California went crazy, they went.
You know, Pac-Man made it seem like this interview was a complete flop. I really recognize that he doesn't know a lot. Or he's lying or something. I don't know. But I doubt it's the latter. I think he genuinely doesn't know. But it's not unhinged. It's about as... He sounds like a regular dude who just doesn't know. You know? And I don't think that somebody who would explicitly say, like Kamala, would explicitly say, oh yeah, we're raising it 100%. We've got to raise it. I think that's way worse than somebody who's bit uncertain or talking around it because he doesn't want to raise it, which kind of sounds like what he's doing. He can't say that he doesn't want to raise it because everybody wants it raised. Too many people want it raised. But he can't say that he's going to raise it because that would be a destructive move.
Went crazy. And people, the restaurants are closing all over. Many more people are hurt.
So I hear you saying, similarly to sort of what you said in 2020, will you consider it? Is this something you're going to look at?
I'd want to speak to the governors. And the other thing that's very complicated about minimum wages is places are so different. Mississippi and Alabama and great places are very different than New York or California. I mean, in terms of the cost of living and other things. So it would be nice to have just a minimum wage for the whole country, but it wouldn't work because you have places where it's very inexpensive to live, where a minimum wage, which is $8 or $9, might be, might have very little effect because the cost of living in certain places is really low.
Before we move on to immigration, which I do want to talk about, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, said he will not leave his post even if you ask him to. Will you try to replace Jerome Powell?
No, I don't think so. I don't see it. But I think if I told him to, he would. But if I asked him to, he probably wouldn't. But if I told him to, he would.
You don't have plans to do that right now?
No, I don't.
So what is the one thing that every single person who is printing millions of dollars online has in common? Myself.
Okay, let's talk about mass deportation, one of your big agenda items. You've talked about prioritizing people who have criminal histories.
Correct.
But is it your plan to deport everyone who is here illegally over the next 4 years?
Well, I think you have to do it. And it's a very tough thing to do. But you have to.
This is probably one of the best interviewers I've seen in a minute.
You have rules, regulations, laws. They came in illegally. The people that have been treated very unfairly are the people that have been online for 10 years to come into the country. And we're going to make it very easy for people to come in terms of they have to pass the test. They have to be able to tell you what the Statue of Liberty is. They have to tell you a little bit about our country. They have to love our country. They can't come out of prisons. We don't want people that are in for murder. So we had 11,000 and 13,000 different estimates, 13,099 murderers released into our country over the last 3 years. They're walking down the streets. They're walking next to you and your family. And they're very dangerous.
The 13,000 figure, I think, goes back about 40 years.
No, it doesn't. No,
That
it's within the 3-year period.
figure.
It's during the Biden term. No, that was a fiction that they put that out. This was done by the Border Patrol. It's 13,099, and it's during the Biden period of time. And these are murderers, many of whom murdered more than one person. You don't want those people in this country.
But you're saying something, sir, that's significant. I just want to make sure I'm clear, which is that you're saying, yes, you're going to focus on the people with criminal histories, but everyone who's here illegally has to go.
I'm saying this. We have to get the criminals out of our country. We have to get people that were taken out of mental institutions and put them back into their mental institution, no matter what country it is. Do you know that Venezuela, their prisons are at the lowest point in terms of emptiness that they've ever been? They're taking their people out of those prisons by the thousands, and they're drunk. And just to get back, because I know exactly what you're getting at. Number one, we're doing criminals, and we're going to do them really rapidly. We're getting the worst gang probably with MS-13, and the Venezuelan gangs are the worst in the world. They're vicious, violent people. And you see what they've done in Colorado and other places. They're taking over, literally taking over apartment complexes and doing it with impunity. They don't care. They couldn't. They just are. They're in the real estate business.
The local police say that is not the case in Colorado.
Oh, it's totally the case. I mean, I have it
you
on
don't
tape.
believe the local police.
I play it. I used to play it at my rallies every single night. No, they're breaking into doors. They're taking over the building.
But sir, you
and by the way,
the point,
the police are afraid to do anything.
You raised the point that the logistics are complicated. You said
Sure
it yourself.
they are, but everything's complicated.
Yeah, you need 24 times more ICE detention capacity just to deport 1 million people per year, not to mention more agents, more judges, more planes. is it realistic to deport everyone who's
You have
here
no
illegally?
choice. First of all, they're costing us a fortune. But we're starting with the criminals, and we got to do it. And then we're starting with others, and we're going to see how it goes.
Who are the others?
Others are other people outside of criminals. We have convicted murders. We don't mean people that are even on trial. We have people that have murdered numerous people are on our streets and in our farms, and we have to get them out of our country.
What about
Again, this was really just a test stream because last time I went live, it was very bad. But, this was not what I expected. I expected it to be quite crazy. Well, I guess I didn't really expect it, but David Pac-Man said it. And I don't really trust David Pac-Man, so I should have known better. But whether or not I'll do a live schedule, go live regularly, is you know, it may or may not happen. I don't know. It's very difficult to do this. I've realized that if you try to get it perfect, you never do it. Like, I would never go live. So, yeah. We're going to stop here. Yeah.